While the Bulls have acquired younger players in this offseason to send the roster down a path of a youth movement, I want to talk about two players specifically whose growth and development could be hugely important of if this rebuild is going to be a hit or miss for this front office in Buzelis and Josh Giddey. That's not to slight any other players on the roster. We'll talk about them as well. But I want to talk about how important it is for these guys to end up being hits for the Chicago Bulls for this rebuild to be successful. Pseudo rebuild, I guess we should say at this point. All that, plus we're going to dive into the mailbag as it is Saturday, so it is mailbag day. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. So I want to talk about, we've talked a lot about the youth movement. We even talked about how the play style of the Chicago Bulls could be and how the Bulls are going in a different direction with their roster. Now, DeMar DeRozan's off the roster, but Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic still on the roster. But I'd have to personally wait for two out of the core three to not be here before I'm ready to call it a full rebuild. Right now, they are rebuilding, but I can't call it a full rebuild yet until two out of those three players in Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, DeMar DeRozan are officially off the roster and gone. But with that said, the Bulls had started off this kind of youth direction with trading for Josh Giddey, trading Alex Caruso, a fan favorite, for Josh Giddey, a point guard who, while flawed, and while a lot of Bulls fans are wondering how exactly does he fit in, is still a very promising player, and it has an all-star upside. It's up to the Bulls to develop it. And then they went out and drafted Buzelis with their 11th overall pick, a guy who has tremendous talent coming out of this draft. And I want to talk about this to start off this show before we get into the voicemails of just how important is it that one of, if not both these guys, hit for the Chicago Bulls for this rebuild to be a success, at least maybe faster than what it could be long run, right? To how quick are we going to stay in this potential rebuild? And this is kind of brought about by this, right? And I'm not going to lie. With the Franz Wagner contract extension, and one of the players that Buzelis was compared a lot to is Franz Wagner. And a lot of Bulls fans, of course, know that Franz Wagner was taken with the Chicago Bulls pick, even though I don't think if the Bulls had that pick, they would have drafted Franz. But Franz Wagner is a player that has turned himself into a damn good player. We can talk about the merits of him getting a max level contract or not. But at the end of the day, this is a player that has increased his output every single year, starting off playing 30 minutes per game, still starting all 79 games in his rookie year, starting off with 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists basically, and right under a steal per game. His second year in the league, 18.6 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game, and an actual steal per game. And then you look at his third year last year that led into him getting this contract extension, 19.7 points per game. He also rebounded 5.3 rebounds per game, 3.7 assists, and 1.1 steals per game, which leaves him with a career average of 18 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and 1 steal per game. Franz Wagner is a really good player. Is he a star-level player? No, but he's a really good player. And I would say this, if Buzelis turns into that, then the Bulls got them a damn good pick, especially at number 11, where it's kind of hit or miss how players develop. Yes, Buzelis has higher potential than that. I want to make no mistake about it. But when you look at, as well as Franz Wagner, over the course of his NBA career, he's missed like a total of 12 games over 3 years. We would love that type of consistency here at the Chicago Bulls. But Buzelis offers the Bulls a player that has tremendous upside, needs to work on that three-point shot, needs to work on defense, but offensively, he is so well-rounded, minus the three-point shot. And if Buzelis at that position, whether he plays the long-term 3 or the long-term 4, I think he's going to start off at the 3, but long-term in that, Buzelis would offer such a nice foundational piece that you can build with. You have to prove that you can build around him, but that you can build with. And that is one of the important things, especially in a draft that's labeled as a weaker draft. Talk about the 2025 draft a lot over the next year, but Buzelis, and he doesn't have, I'm not saying do all this in his rookie year. I'm not even saying that he has to live up to the numbers that Franz Wagner had. In no way am I saying that. It's going to be a bit of a different season, especially if Zach LaVine ends up staying on this roster to start the season or to finish the season. It's going to be different than what Franz Wagner walked into with the Magic. But hitting on this first pick that's in this kind of new refresh of your roster is hugely important. And that's not to take away from the development Kobe's doing, the development Io's doing, hopefully the development we see from Patrick Williams, Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, Adama Sanogo. We want to see all these guys progress. But Buzelis being and starting this off with a hit would set this and put such a better taste in the mouth of Bulls fans, while also making sure to say that, hey, we got us one. Let's get off to the races. I always use the baby Bulls as a comparison. The Kirk Heinrich, Luol Deng, Ben Gordon, that era of Bulls. While they had misses in Tyrus Thomas, absolutely was a miss in that time. Marcus Teague, a miss in that time period as well. Taj Gibson, a hit, right? They had James Johnson was a miss for the Bulls, ended up having a really good career. So not everything has to be a hit, but you laid out a foundation, even though some of those players came after Derrick Rose, but you laid down a foundation before you drafted Derrick Rose. And then by the time you got that superstar in Derrick Rose, you had role players that understood who and what they were. And that is what the Bulls are looking for clarity. Exactly who are these players on the roster? And Matas Buzelis answering that call sooner rather than later can go a huge way in kind of dictating what we do going forward. If you can have a Matas Buzelis that has this similar type output to Franz Wagner eventually, that's a position, guess what? You don't have to worry about. And that's what this key is every year in the draft, adding somebody who eventually is somebody that you don't have to worry about. That's at a position then that makes that position something you don't have to worry about. And then you develop, and then you make some trades to move up, things like that. Matas Buzelis is a really good player to start off a pseudo rebuild. Again, using the word pseudo until we get rid of two out of the big three. But he's a really good player to do that because he has that tremendous upside and was looked at to be a top 5 player in this draft by most mocks, and the Bulls took a shot at the upside. And I, for one, am not mad at taking a shot around the upside. How it develops, as well as Matas Buzelis having the personality, having the attitude, having that edge, those are type of things that you can build around and you want on your team, but you also want hard workers. And he seems like he's going to be a hard worker. But then you look at the player that the Bulls acquired for Alex Caruso and Josh Giddey, a trade that many Bulls fans are still down on because the Bulls didn't get picks. But outside of all that, with Giddey being somebody who is up for a contract extension after this season, it is hugely important that Josh Giddey ends up being a hit for this front office. And again, this first season may be learning. It may be adaptation. It may be building blocks. And Josh Giddey is not nearly as bad as what some Bulls fans that are upset by this trade make him out to be. He has a ton of things that he needs to work on. When you look at the way that he plays, when he's actually able to be a point guard, there's a lot there that you can work with, and there's a lot of promise there. It's up to him, the Bulls front office, getting the coaches in here that they got in here to help develop players in Wes Unseld Jr. and Dan Craig. Getting those guys, it's hugely important. If them being former heads of player development, I said Dan Gilbert again. Did I say that Dan Craig? It's hugely important that having a foundation now that can get the most out of these players. And Josh Giddey being 21 years old, 22 throughout most of the season, it's important that at the minimum, the Bulls look at Josh Giddey and say, this is a guy who has a role on our team. We know what he's going to bring. And another one we don't have to worry about. And again, that doesn't mean that you may not upgrade down the road, but that means you have a solid point guard play up until that place, much like we had from Kirk Heinrich. I am not comparing Josh Giddey to Kirk Heinrich. I'm just saying in the sense that you had a solid point guard there. You end up finding your point guard of the future in Derrick Rose. And then Kurt Heinrich, we ended up trading him, bringing him back, but even in those first 2 years, played a really good role with Derrick Rose. So you want to have, and this is the key thing in when you are going through a rebuild. You actually have to have pieces that show that you can build with them. And I think that Matas Buzelis and Josh Giddey are hugely important to what this front office is trying to do because they have to hit on them. If you don't, you traded Alex Caruso, who was a free agent who could have very well walked, but that is, again, another sign of doubt. If you look at it and Josh Giddey ends up being somebody that you look at and say, man, we don't want Josh Giddey to be Michael Carter Williams, somebody that we went out and acquired a year or so after we got rid of Derrick Rose and had still some promise, right? A former rookie of the year, had taken a step down, still had some promise around him, but it ended up being a lot of nothing. He didn't develop parts of his game. He's basically the same player he was as a rookie when we got rid of him. You don't want that. You want players that's showing that they're going to be something. And these, yes, are players that still have huge parts of their games that they need to develop. Make no mistake about that. Huge parts of their game that they need to develop. But being at 21 and 19 years old, 22 and 20 years old when the season starts, these are hugely important pieces to what this front office is trying to do. And I'm not here to say that they're necessarily going to hit. I'm just saying that they better hope damn well that they do. And the hit can be varying. I'm not saying they have to turn into superstars, but they have to turn into players that you look at as part of your team and you look at and say, we got us one. It's one that we don't have to worry about. Will they? That is up and down. A lot of Bulls fans are going to give you difference of opinions depending on how they view these players, and I understand all of it. But it's hugely important as well. And that's, again, not to take away from the importance of Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips. You want some of those guys to hit as well. But these first two pieces, as part of your revamp of your roster, you damn sure want to make sure that they hit as well. And hopefully you're adding that to a Kobe White who's taken his game from almost 20 points per game to 22, 23, 24 points per game. You're adding players around that. The Bulls have some serious defensive deficits, which we'll talk about as we get closer to the season, as we kind of finalize the roster. And three-point shooting is still a thing. And so developing these guys, finding ways to develop them, using Josh Giddey's playmaking, using Buzelis' creation in the mid-range and his athleticism to get out and run with a player like Josh Giddey. It's important that the Bulls hit on these. And that's just what I wanted to spend this time before we dive into the mailbag talking about. Let me know what you guys think on that, of course, down below. Let's go ahead and get into the voicemails for today. This one's from JC.
What's up, hey? This is JC from 219, man. Hey, I just want to leave my thoughts on what's going on, in this offseason with Chicago. I like what they're doing, man. They realize that, things is not going to work out. With the Bulls down 2 years, really, man, the injuries killed us 3 years ago, and they killed us every year after that. But I do like the fact that the Bulls are going young, and, I like the fact that a lot of the players are around the same age, man. I think that's going to be real good. These guys get to grow together. And please, man, I wish these Bulls fans stop saying that we overpaid Patrick Williams. We got Patrick Williams for $90 million for 5 years. That is not a bad contract at all. I mean, 15, maybe 20 a year at the end? That's good money for Patrick Williams, man. And, we got him for a long time. So he got 5 years to really show us what he can do. I feel like with DeMar leaving, he's going to be a little more higher on the shot chart. And, hopefully, man, we see him progress and, turn into something better than what he is now, as long as he stays healthy. But keep the content coming, man. Looking forward to it every day, and, go Bulls.
Bulls going young. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the Bulls are absolutely going young, and I love what you said about pointing out that they're on nearly the same timeline. Kobe and Ayo are older, right? And Patrick Williams is kind of in between that. Then you got the Buzelis, the Josh Giddeys, who are much younger as well. The Sanogo fits in there. Julian Phillips fits more with Buzelis and Josh Giddey's timeline as well. So you have guys there that are all on similar timelines, and that's really good part of it. Yeah, you're going to eventually have to pay him. You may have to pay Josh Giddey as soon as this offseason. You have to pay Ayo and Kobe in 2 seasons from now because you only gave them 3 years deals. And then Julian and Dalen somewhere fit in that as well. So it's setting and going on a younger path doesn't always mean that the progression is going to be linear. And a lot of Bulls fans are going to try to paint, and I know it. I'm telling you guys, prophesize, call me C-Red Fred. I am prophesizing right now that there are going to be a lot of Bulls fans that automatically go to, oh, this rebuild isn't anything. AK and AKME ain't shite. And all this, if the Bulls take a brief step back, but that may be by design. Sometimes when you're in there developing, there's going to be some pipes that are busted. That's eventually how you make those diamonds. And so ultimately, that's what it comes down to, I think. And yeah, there are going to be a lot of Bulls fans that are ready to just write home the story and whether the Bulls have success right away or not in next season. And I think they're looking more towards the short term than the long term. And my hope is that AK and Eversley are finally looking towards the long term and not just living in the right now. You still need to take care of the right now as far as development, getting these guys reps, building a foundation, getting these guys learning how to play on the same page. But the success, that may be the long-term goal as far as the number of wins. And we'll see what comes with that. As far as Patrick Williams, I've made my thoughts very well known on the Patrick Williams contract. It's a contract that, yeah, it could be looked at as an overpay now. I understand it for people who say that it's an overpay right now, but if he develops, it could be looked at as a hugely valuable contract for the Bulls when it's all said and done, as the salary cap continues to increase and that deal gets closer and closer to just being a mid-level exception type deal. But it's up to Patrick to develop. It's up to the coaches to put him in the right positions, and it's up to him to take the most of those opportunities if and when he's given them. Let's hope that he can do that. All right, let's get into the next voicemail. This one's from Samson.
What's good, Hayes? This is Samson. I would say long-time listener, but I can't really claim that. It's probably been like 8 or 9 months since I stumbled upon your channel. But, man, as a kid right now living in South Dakota with family roots in Cicero and Peoria, I've got to tell you, dude, your shit keeps me going, man. It keeps me keeps me moving forward. I love what you do, and there truly is no one else doing it like you do. And I can see the passion, whatever, man. Yeah, man. But I just want to call in for my second time now, to say that it really took some stoicism not to cry like Matas' brother when he landed with the Bulls, man. And I mean, I kind of had like a similar feeling when Angel, fell to the sky. But anyway, or fell from the sky. Anyway, but I love that Matas is, Chi-Town's own. I love that he's known as a trash talker. Like, I feel like you can't be from Chicago and grow up without wanting to fuck with your opponent like Michael did. And I know it's probably like hyperbole and just way too early, but I also see some Dirk in his game, like with the arc on his shot and his turnaround fadeaway, one-legged. Like, I see some of that. Long story short, I was just curious where you'd evaluate his floor and ceiling to be. And apologies if this has already been covered. I've missed last week because of a family reunion. But anyway, man, let me know though. Peace.
First off, thank you for loving the show. I say this all the time. This is nothing but pure passion from a Bulls fan, and that's what it is. Yeah, I've grown, of course, in starting the show, and I have a little bit of inside knowledge on some things, but it's nothing to write home about. Like, it's just passion, and I hope that comes through. And yeah, we're going to continue to grow this thing. Now, as far as Matas Buzelis being drafted by the Bulls and comparing that to Angel Reese, here's what I'll say. Matas Buzelis is offensively what Angel Reese can possibly be. What Angel Reese is defensively right away. And you've seen it, especially in the last game. Our offense is starting to come around. I like what you're saying in getting the value out of those picks. Angel Reese picked at number 7, I believe, and Matas Buzelis picked at number 11. When we all, coming into the draft and maybe even a year ago, everybody had and viewed these players as such a higher regard, then some of the luster kind of wore off, right? And so let's hope that Matas Buzelis, we are talking about him as somebody in the same ilk as an Angel Reese and how she's been able to impact that Chicago Sky team when it's all said and done. And I completely agree with you with Matas having that edge. He just has that it factor. And as far as personality-wise, we got to see if he's going to have it on the court. But I do love the personality. I do like that he talks some shit. I do like that he doesn't back down. But all the talk means nothing if it's not backed up by success and progress on the basketball court. And let's hope that Matas Buzelis brings that. All right, let's get into the next voicemail. This one's from CP.
Yo, man, what's going on? It's Certification Poppy. And I had a quick question. And it comes with everything that's going on with DeMar DeRozan, and I'm trying to trade Zach and Boots potentially. But I had a question. So the Bulls organization is already known as one that doesn't take care of stars in a sense, or it's, a lot of stars don't want to come play in Chicago for the organization just based on how they run things. Do you think that with the way that the offseason has gone, that has helped or hurt the organization in a way? Because in a sense, with all the reports coming out, them saying that we could have sold off, or they could have sold off Caruso, DeMar, and all of those guys, and Andre Drummond for assets or like other players and things like that. With them potentially knowing that we were going young in a sense, or even if they did know, because we all heard that Jerry kind of canceled out that the Caruso trade. But like knowing what we know now, do you think that we could have signed DeMar or sent him somewhere else, and he could have been happy, and Caruso would have been happy, Andre Drummond would have been happy, things like that. Like that's the one thing that is kind of confusing to me, or that I kind of think about just based on how it's kind of like how we work at our jobs. Like our managers are just not doing the things that we say or that we're suggesting, and they just kind of take that power away from us in a way. But let me hear your thoughts. Appreciate the channel. All right, peace.
Listen, I'll say this. You asked, as that hurt the reputation around the Bulls of them not taking care of their players because they didn't trade them. I mean, here's the thing with the DeMar thing, the Bulls offered him 2 years, $80 million. So if the perception matters and people look at and players look at the full scope, the Bulls offered him more than what clearly most teams felt like he was worth in the open market. So they were willing to take care of them. Unfortunately, he didn't take the deal, and then the Bulls were forced to reevaluate where their roster sat, and that left DeMar DeRozan on the outskirts. And could that be looked at as another thing that people use to knock the Bulls? Absolutely. I won't be naive enough to act like it won't be. You know, in my estimation, it shouldn't. Now, the Zach LaVine thing, that's different. I do think that it depends on how teams view it. Do they understand what the organization tried to do in building something around Zach and it just didn't work and they have to go in a different direction? Something that many franchises have done. The Bulls should have struck on it earlier. Or do they look at it as a franchise that did wrong by the player that they made the highest paid player? Now, ultimately, as far as sending Zach LaVine to the destination that he wants, I am of the mind of this. To me, you owe the first due diligence to your franchise, and you have to put your team in the best situation that you can possible. And unfortunately, they missed out on that by trading low on the value. But I don't look at this as saying that this team needs to all of a sudden do exactly what Zach LaVine wants. I don't think that. Now, as far as making more moves at the deadline, I do think that is a possibility. And we'll see what happens there. Ultimately, I think that this is that they are going to probably be in evaluation mode early in the season to see, all right, how many of these young guys with the newest opportunities, how many of these guys have shined? And I would not be surprised if, maybe not at the beginning, but don't be surprised if, like, let's say Dalen Terry does get 15, 18 minutes and he doesn't look good. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe those guys are shipped off for some draft assets in the future. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but I'm saying that I wouldn't be surprised if it did, if they, not to say that they're bringing in pieces to win now, but I mean for picks, things like that they may look at that and say, listen, we brought Dalen here, we drafted him, he's not progressing the way that we want. We have another wing now, and Mattis Buzelis. Julian Phillips maybe took that step up. There may not be that minutes there, especially if Patrick Williams is playing good as well. Let's go ahead and see what we can get now. You may not be able to get much, but I'm just using Dalen as an example of that. So we may see what happens with that. And even to say that about Patrick Williams as well. Yeah, they locked in Patrick Williams, but who's to say after one more season, maybe if the Bulls say, hey, Pat, we gave you that deal. Yeah, you got 4 more years left on it. Let's see what we can get for Pat at the draft. Maybe we can package our own pick, move up, something like that. So I think this is a team now that's going to be in evaluation mode of that young talent and see how much of it that they think can stick around long term. That's my thought process. All right, let's get into the next one. This one is from Todd.
Hey, what's up, man? It's Todd. Hope you're well. Leaving this message on Wednesday after finding out that LeBron opted into that max deal, thus leaving DeMar out and probably out in the cold. But this is about Zach LaVine, and this is my concern. As you know, I talk about us mostly focused on 2025 and maintaining that pick and getting younger. My concern with not getting a Zach deal done and bringing him back is that he's going to have to prove to the league that he's good. And he and Rich Paul are probably going to say, yo, no matter what, you already don't have respect for Billy, so fuck his system. You go get yours. And we're going to have an entire Mirotic situation. Remember those games that Mirotic took us out of that seed because we went on what, that 7-game or whatever win streak? Imagine a season of that. And that's what we're going to get with Zach. He's going to be all-star Zach because that injury was bullshit. And I've been saying that since he went and did that surgery, I should say, was bullshit. He opted into the surgery because he did not want to get traded to Detroit. So he's good. He's not injury prone. He is actually good. And I think if we take him back and we don't trade him for parts or whatever we can get, he's going to come in here and probably account for 4 or 5 more wins than we should have with the current roster as constructed. We have to move him because he will be the cause for us losing that top 10 pick, if anything, next year. So that to me is the most important reason to move on Zach. I don't care what we get back at this point, but we cannot lose that pick next year. So that's my point. What do you think? All right. Talk to you soon, bro.
And Todd has been very consistent on everything being built around the 2025 pick, and I understand it. But I don't think you compared it to Mirotic. Mirotic was still playing within the system. He didn't like take over and just say, oh, no, fuck what the coach is doing. He just played really fucking well, right? And so I think when you look at Zach LaVine, I think that would do more to hurt his image if you can clearly tell he's going into just him mode so he can pat his stats and the Bulls are looking like shit. I honestly think that could actually hurt him. I get what you're saying and the concern there. Make no mistake about it. But I think if he was to do that and the Bulls look bad, that would do nothing but hurt the fact of he's not a winning player. He puts up empty stat. Like, I'm not saying that because I don't think that. But I'm saying that perception around the league, that he would do nothing but to help that perception if he did that. Like, it would hurt him further. So I think I get what you're saying in it, and I understand that concern. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that share that concern as well. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm not even saying that if the Bulls think that, they should absolutely look to move on from Zach LaVine before the start of the season. And they may be. That may be why we're hearing that they feel like it's the worst case scenario of Zach still on this roster by the start of the season. We just got to see what's going to come of it. So, yeah, we'll see with that. But I agree with you. Keeping that 2025 pick, if that's what this Bulls team is focused on, that is the most important thing because that's where you can find your franchise-changing talent. But, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullsCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.